Choosing a weapon in Siege can be a daunting task. Every gun has their own recoil patterns, attachments, and damage outputs that can be overwhelming for new players to understand. And with the rework to LMGs in the last season, the choice has gotten a lot more complicated. So in today's video, I shot every LMG in the shooting range, and I'll be using the data I collected to rank them all from worst to best. Where will your favorite LMG show up? Well, make sure you watch the video all the way through to find out, because some of these placements will surprise you. Before I can go into the placements, I must first explain my testing methodology. When testing guns recoil, I'll be using their best barrel attachment, whether that be flash hider or compensator, and I'll be using the highest magnification sight available on each weapon to provide a more accurate representation of what the recoil will look like in a live game. I want the recoil in the video to be as accurate as possible to what you'll actually experience when playing the game hands-on, which is something I got comments about a lot in my previous series. Outside of that, testing will mainly come down to the 5 most important stats of any weapon, like damage per shot, fire rate, capacity, recoil, and reload speed. With this LMG episode specifically, the reload and capacity stats are going to matter a lot more than normal due to the LMG rework that was released last season. After that rework, most of the LMGs have very similar recoil patterns, and the DPS stats have always been very similar with a few outliers. So a weapon's reload speed and capacity is going to be weighted heavily in these rankings with few exceptions. I'll be posting a Google spreadsheet that's public down in the description with all of the data I collected, so that way you can get a better understanding of why I ranked the LMGs the way I did. And anyways, I think that's enough yapping. Let's go ahead and get into the video. Now, starting out the video with the worst LMG in the game, we have the T95. This may seem surprising considering that Ying is one of the strongest operators in the game, but hear me out. The reason for the T95 finding itself this far down on the list is due to it being the second worst DPS LMG in the game with a damage per second of 492 according to my calculations. And that's because it only deals 46 damage and its fire rate is a measly 650 rounds per minute. Its capacity doesn't make up for it either, with an average 80 bullets per mag. It does have a reload speed of 3 seconds, which is the fastest on this list, but that isn't enough to make up for its disappointing stats. Realistically, the reason why people don't complain about this weapon's stats is due to the gun only being available to Ying. And since her gadget leaves her opponents blind, her gun doesn't have to be that amazing. But if her gun was added to different operators, people would very quickly realize how bad of a weapon the T95 truly is. It does have really low recoil, but that pretty much is all it has going for it. The next weapon coming into the 7th spot suffers from a very different problem, and that problem is that it barely qualifies as an LMG. The M249 Saw is basically the M249 off of Capitao, but with a 60 round magazine. This gives the gun the benefit of a faster reload speed, but it suffers from the second lowest mag size out of all the LMGs. The M249 Saw does have decent damage stats and recoil though. It deals high damage with a low fire rate, making its DPS a decent 520, which compared to its predecessor, the T95, is miles ahead, and the recoil is similar to the T95 as well. However, the one thing holding the gun back is in its magazine capacity of 60. It makes the gun feel more like an AR than an LMG, and I definitely think there are better options out there if you're looking for a low capacity LMG. Now moving on to the 6th spot, we have the 6P41 LMG from Fuse and Finka. This is the first good LMG in the video in my opinion, and that is because it is extremely well rounded. It has a solid damage and fire rate, resulting in a very similar damage per second to the previous M249 Saw of 521. It has pretty decent recoil, allowing you to hit your shots at most ranges, and its capacity is an amazing 100 bullets per mag. The only thing going against this LMG is the reload speed, which is a whopping 8.5 seconds, the longest in this video by a large margin. Overall, this is still a solid LMG despite this, and it's definitely worth running on operators that have access to it. Now, the same thing cannot be said about the M249, which has the same exact stats pretty much as the 6P41, but with a way better reload speed. The M249 has a damage of 48 and a fire rate of 650, resulting in a DPS of 520, and it has a capacity of 100. This means that it is effectively identical to the 6P41 on paper, with the only real discernible difference between the two being their reload speeds, where the M249 has a reload speed of 7.6 seconds, while the 6P41 has a reload speed of 8.5 seconds. They even have similar recoil when it comes to controllability. This makes the ranking of the M249 very simple, since it's basically just a slightly better carbon copy of the 6P41. It's still an amazing LMG with a deep magazine size and solid damage, but it isn't super different from other guns on this list. For the LMG-E, this is a completely different story. Out of all of the LMGs in the game, it's probably one of the most picked in my experience. Ironically, the biggest issue with the LMG-E is its stat sheet. The gun has the worst damage on paper out of all of the LMGs in this this video. And it also has a mediocre fire rate, resulting in it having a DPS of 492, the worst DPS in this video by far. However, that doesn't matter since the gun has pretty low recoil and it has a magazine capacity of 150 rounds. This brings the gun to the point where reloading is completely irrelevant, which is a really nice benefit for an LMG. It allows you to constantly pre-fire and take gunfights with multiple enemies, which is what LMGs are designed for. And you have to keep in mind that while its DPS is the worst in this video, it's only behind LMGs at the top of this list by 20 to 30 DPS. There definitely is a solid case to be made for this LMG being extremely strong, which is why I decided to put it at the 4th spot on this video. I just think having better stats is slightly better than having a super huge magazine capacity. Moving past the 4th spot, we have the G8A1 available on IQ and Amaru coming in at the 3rd spot. This LMG is a pretty extreme outlier compared to other LMGs in this category, and that is apparent in its stat sheet. It may sacrifice damage since it only deals 37 damage per shot, but it makes up for it with sheer fire rate, with it at the time of recording having a stupid high fire rate of 850, which is the 2nd highest in the LMG category. This allows for its DPS to be a whopping 524 while still having a low damage per shot statistic. Now you may think, well, the G8 must have high recoil then, since it has such a high fire rate, and that would typically be the case with most weapons in Siege. But as I said earlier, this weapon is a complete outlier because it actually has some of the easiest to control recoil out of all of the LMGs in this video. However, the gun does have one downside, that being its low magazine capacity of 50 bullets, which since it has a high fire rate, you'll find yourself running low on ammo pretty often. This also makes the gun feel more like an assault rifle with a drum magazine rather than an LMG, but it's still a really solid weapon, so it has to go in the 3rd spot on this list in my opinion. This is actually my favorite LMG in the game, but I felt the other 2 LMGs deserve the spots more based on their stats. One of those LMGs is the Alda 556 available on Maestro, and just like the G8A1, this weapon is an insane outlier compared to other weapons in its class. It has a really low damage of 35, but its fire rate is an insane 900 rounds per minute, allowing it to compete with machine pistols on fire rate. This makes the Alda's all-round DPS 525, the 2nd highest in this video. However, just like with the G8, the Alda barely has any recoil despite its high fire rate, allowing you to shred anyone you get into a gunfight with. Also, its pretty decent magazine size allows it to be one of the best guns in the game for those 1vx situations, since you can get away with engaging multiple enemies without reloading. I am in love with this weapon just like with the G8. It is genuinely one of my favorite guns in the game to use. It literally feels like you're walking around with a minigun in your hand. However, the final LMG in this video barely manages to edge out the Alda. That final LMG is the DP27, the LMG unique to Tachanka's loadout. This LMG is an absolute demon. It deals a whopping 60 damage, meaning it 2-shots most opponents, allowing it to rival DMRs when it comes to damage, and it has a fire rate on top of that of 550. This makes the gun's overall damage per second 550, the highest in this video by a long shot. To go along with this, the DP27 has the lowest recoil out of all of the LMGs in this video, a decent magazine size of 70 considering its fire rate, and a solid reload speed of 4.6 seconds. There is pretty much no downside to the DP27. The only thing you could potentially argue as a detriment is its super low fire rate, which makes it hard to land multiple shots on quick moving targets. But considering you only have to land 2 shots to put an enemy down, I think its damage makes up for that. The DP27 even has the added benefit of large destructive capability, allowing for Tachanka to make rotates and head holes for his entire team. Overall, a great LMG that is held back by the operator it's equipped on. It's definitely worthy of being crowned the best LMG in Siege, and I think most of you would agree if you started using it more. Anyways, that wraps up today's video. As always, these videos are strictly my opinion, and if you disagree, feel free to leave your takes in the comments down below. If you enjoyed today's video, I make Siege content just like this twice a week, so go subscribe to the channel and follow me on Twitter if you don't want to miss the next upload. Also, if you want to watch another video just like this one, I'll be popping up on your screen right now that I'm sure you'll enjoy. I'll see you next time, friends, and peace.